Introducing a television series for lovers of eccentric characters, beautiful scenery, extraordinary women, fabulous architecture and trains. Lots of trains.
Welcome to Arcady, Mr. Pye.
That's Jasper Pye, civil servant and mild-mannered hero of Love on a Branch Line.
Is one of the ingredients, bubonic?
No, beetroot.
From the writer of A Bit of a Do.
He's odd, of course.
How awful.
Love on a Branch Line, this week's Montana Sunday Theatre on 1. Next on New Zealand's news leader, up-to-the-minute events, issues, sport and weather on One Network News and Homes. More keen contestants step up to spin our Wheel of Fortune, and a rift grows even wider in Coronation Street. Two thieves fall out over their dream woman and land in the lap of the bill. Crime Watch and its update calls for your leads. And after Richard Omanay's British comedy Side by Side, Primetime checks news tonight on 1.
Leading tonight's news, the storms bring a health scare in the capital.
Raw sewage spills across suburban Wellington streets, homes are evacuated and food shops closed.
And the storms march on. There's widespread damage and disruption through central New Zealand.
A dirty deed at a schoolboy rugby match. A spectator lands himself in court.
And bridging the gap, a sick Jordanian girl symbolises the first steps towards a new peace.
Good evening. Tonight we have extensive coverage of the storms which hit central New Zealand overnight. Neighbourhoods were left awash, floodwaters lapped through living rooms, people evacuated their homes, roads and railway lines were closed and farmlands flooded. The storms also pushed Wellington's ageing sewerage system beyond breaking point. Raw sewage and floodwaters ran a metre deep through the streets in the suburb of Kilbirnie, causing a health scare. And that's where we begin tonight's storm coverage. Reporter Ray Lamb joins us live from Kilbirnie.
I'm standing in Kilbirnie Terrace in Wellington. As you can see, the council is just pumping away the last of the raw sewage. But it was a different story this morning when I had to wade through it, trying not to look at what I was walking in as I waded through it up to my knees.
In the cold light of the day, hard reality for Kilbirnie Crescent residents.
You've seen it like this before, that's for sure.
Homes and possessions drowning not just in floodwaters but in raw sewage.
Well, the house is only 13 weeks old, so we've just moved in there, you know. It took us a year to build and get in there and we get wiped out, so...
My car's floating in the backyard, so yeah, I won't be going anywhere at the moment.
At about 3 o'clock this morning, one of the city's two main sewers burst. Thousands of illegal stormwater connections run into the pipe, and it was simply unable to cope with the torrential rain. The first nearby residents knew was when firefighters knocked on the door. About 5 families were evacuated from homes knee-deep in foul water. An upstairs flat became a refuge.
It wouldn't be the first time I spent a night away from home, eh?
By this morning, laughter had turned to tears.
They're just trying to stop the water coming in before we can get on with the clean-up. So there's no school today. And we can't do anything till the water stops coming down. So it's just a matter of wait and see and then have a big tidy up, I guess.
Closest to the sewage spill, St Patrick's Primary School. The school and local kindergarten are expected to be closed for several days because of the health risk. Council workers have spent the day making temporary repairs. Sandbags were used to stem the flow and permission gained for much of the city's raw sewage to be diverted into the harbour. Public health officials are warning people to thoroughly clean themselves, clothes and vehicles which have been in contact with the contaminated water. 5 food premises have agreed to close, and residents can't return home until their houses have been thoroughly cleaned and inspected. It'll be days before life in Kilbirnie Crescent returns to normal.
In fact, public health authorities say it'll be at least a couple of days before people can go home. They have to be absolutely certain that there's no health risk.
Well, Ray, what hygiene precautions are Kilbirnie residents being advised to take at the moment?
Well, people are being told to use their common sense, to use lots of soap and hot water, and where furnishings and curtains and car upholstery has been in contact with the water, people are being asked to take it out and wash it, and if they can't get it clean, then to throw it away.
Well, in situations like this, health's always a concern. What should people do if they feel unwell?
Well, the health authorities say that if people have been in contact with the water, if they're going to get sick, it'll probably happen within 4 to 24 hours. And anyone who is in that situation should talk to their doctors or go to an accident and emergency clinic and be sure to tell them that they have been in contact with the raw sewage.
Ray Lamb, live from Kilbirnie in Wellington. And the Wellington City Council has set up a hotline for Kilbirnie residents to call if they have any concerns. And that number is Wellington 801 3862.
And the rain which caused that trouble with the capital sewers fell as the central North Island experienced one of its worst storms in years. From New Plymouth to Hawke's Bay, rain and wind caused havoc, disrupting roads and businesses. Spiro Anastasia reports.
There were few who would have missed the storm when it started. By morning, the Hutt River was showing the effects of more than 100 millimetres of rain in less than 2 days. But the speed it rose caught many by surprise. This riverside showroom was dry when people arrived at work this morning. Within hours, they were towing their cars to high ground.
These ones that you can see in behind here are all waterlogged, and we've just got a mechanic down now trying to get them cleaned up so that we can move them further up the road.
Over the top of your car, mate. Just a little bit. Oh, too much, mate. It's only been covered up with water.
Roads were another casualty. If they weren't closed by the sudden rise in water, they were snarled by traffic. Not even diplomatic immunity was able to save the Chinese embassy. No interpretation was needed. The road to the Wairarapa was closed, as was the rail link. Even if the route south were open, many would have trouble reaching them, with floods spreading out across the province. The cemetery on the banks of the Waiohine River was awash. An hour later, it had been engulfed. The same floodwaters also threatening the Waiohine Bridge near Greytown. In the town itself, pensioner flats were evacuated as a precaution.
The residents have been taken away as retired old couples that are there, and I think they took them away last night just to be on the safe side.
Accurate statistics for the Wairarapa aren't available because the weather station was hit by lightning. All around the region, stock was left stranded, high but not dry, farmers trying to reach them as best they could. By the time the storm reached the Hawke's Bay, it had rained itself out. The province hit by a blast furnace of winds around 100 kilometres an hour and temperatures in the high 20s. Power lines around the province were whipped off poles, either by the wind or falling trees. This market garden has never lived up to its name more than it has today. Spiro Anastasia, One Network News.
The storms had blown in from south of the country earlier in the night. On the way through, they marooned more than 80 trampers in huts along the southern Alps. Megan Francis reports.
The Iroquois was out first thing this morning. Among people airlifted to safety from the Lewis Pass was a group of Air Force cadets. They were on a training exercise at Lake Tennyson when caught by the weather. The lake rose so much it washed away this orange vehicle and took out several bridges. For the men rescued, it will be nice to get home.
Yeah, the weather has put a dampener on it, but we're quite all right here, yeah. It's just miserable, that's all.
Another 8 trampers still remain caught in the Lewis Pass.
Some concern from the point of view that we don't know a lot about some of them. We're concerned about the amount of food and also the type of clothing they might have and their general well-being.
As of this morning, 34 people were trapped at Lewis Pass, 14 were caught at Arthur's Pass and 29 in the Mount Cook National Park. All those at Arthur's Pass were airlifted out today and the road reopened. Several trampers walked out last night by themselves. They say it was hard going.
It was pouring rain and really cold and high winds and quite a lot of climbing to get around things, so it was a long day.
Meanwhile, further north, the Buller River is a raging torrent, threatening farms in the Murchison area. 4 metres of one property has already slumped into the Buller. Tomorrow, the Iroquois will be back out again, picking up trampers who are still marooned. Megan Francis, One Network News.
Now, our weather forecaster Jim Hickey has been tracking the path of the storms on the satellite monitor. What can you tell us, Jim?
probably something you'd quite like to hear. The situation is slowly improving. The main core of the storm was away to the south of the country, but it's left a huge tongue or pool of nasty disturbed air in Tasman Sea that'll bring in a lot of showers and some thunderstorms tomorrow. But the main rain band currently is over the middle of the North Island, moving quite slowly, so cloud from that is about to engulf the Hamilton area. And we have heavy rainfall warnings tonight for the Tararuas, for the central high country of the North Island, for the ranges of the Eastern Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Possibly another 100 millimetres of rainfall is likely tonight. The winds will keep blowing tonight and tomorrow, but the severe gales and gale force winds have been downgraded.
Well, Jim will be back later with more weather details.
Holmes will also cover aspects of the storm tonight and will update you throughout the evening with a full report on prime time at 10:15.
We've been lucky here in that no lives have been lost, but in Europe at least 70 people have been killed and dozens more are missing after several days of torrential rain. Many victims drowned in their cars when floodwaters 2 metres high swept through the Piemonte region of northern Italy. Forecasters say more storms are on the way, putting pressure on rescue teams still looking for survivors in devastated villages. And environmentalists are blaming deforestation for the disaster, claiming trees and bush would have stemmed the floodwaters.
Ahead on One Network News, the dad whose illegal rugby tackle landed him in court.
And the Race Relations Office, the conciliator, claims it was used as an interest-free bank.
An overprotective father has paid for getting involved in the play during a kids' rugby match. The father foot-tripped an opponent who was about to tackle his son and stop him scoring a try. This afternoon in the Dunedin District Court, the man was found guilty of assault. John McDermott reports.
This amateur video shown to the jury was a key element in the Crown's case. It shows a winger about to score when his father in red steps out and trips the player in yellow who's about to tackle. Today, after a guilty verdict, the 42-year-old defendant was granted permanent name suppression but ordered to pay $500 court costs. Judge David Saunders also discharged him without conviction because a conviction would outweigh the gravity of the offence. The defendant claimed his son's tackler was going to collide with him, so he braced himself to protect an old neck injury. But the jury quickly found in favour of the tall, 100-kilogram, 13-year-old complainant.
I was running down the sideline and tackled the winger, and out of the corner of my eye I seen this guy step towards me and kick me in the thigh.
He left the field injured, but the boy's mother says she's satisfied with today's outcome and says the trial could easily have been avoided.
If he had come to us and apologised to Duncan, and we perhaps may have asked him to make a donation to the Sports Injury Clinic, we would have left it at that. It would never have gone this far.
The court was told the defendant has a fine reputation as a teacher and has already experienced months of anxiety over the spur-of-the-moment offence. John McDermott, One Network News.
The Office of the Race Relations Conciliator came under scrutiny from a parliamentary select committee today. But MPs wanting to focus on the management style of John Clark instead heard allegations that his staff abused office resources. Lee Pearson reports.
John Clark knew he was in the hot seat. He brought his own lawyer, a QC, to help him. And before fielding any critical questions, he was telling MPs about staff who, he said, treated the office like a bank.
I cannot justify to the taxpayer why someone should end up borrowing $2,000, which is interest-free, and being paid back at $5 a week over a period of 4 years.
Mr. Clark said staff loans were used for rental cars, taxi chits, air travel and personal insurance. He told the MPs he was concerned about staff taking time off in lieu and about the attitudes of some. He quoted from one staff member who felt,
"As a Maori woman, she could not work in a time-oriented way."
John Clark's been accused by former staff of bullying and intimidating them. It took Labour's Phil Goff several attempts to get a straight answer from Mr. Clark on this.
Is it your habit to bang your fists on the desk to shout at staff members?
The answer is no. That is not my style to intimidate staff, nor is it my style to shout at staff.
Mr. Clark will be answering more questions about his management style tomorrow. Lee Pearson, One Network News.
The US elections tomorrow made buyers cautious on the local share market. The SE40 slipped 22 points today on a turnover of $46 million. Most of the major shares lost ground. Carter Holt Harvey dropped 7 cents, Telecom 6 and Fletcher Challenge 5. On the money market, our dollar gained against most of the leading currencies except for the Australian dollar.
Americans are about to pass judgment on the Clinton presidency. They vote tomorrow in midterm elections for the Congress, Senate and 36 state governors. Although Mr. Clinton isn't a candidate, he is the issue in a vote which could change the political power structure.
Now, the last time they had power, they were kidding.
The last time Bill Clinton was this hoarse, he was about to win the White House. Tonight he's on the brink of a huge loss. Even though the economy is up, crime is down, and his foreign policy is applauded.
The country is in better shape than it was 21 months ago. Don't let them sucker you.
But Americans are disappointed with Clinton, angry at government. Clinton will suffer. This was his Congress. Yet even here, his reforms either squeaked through on a single vote or died. The Congress voted in tomorrow, dominated by Republicans, will be even less friendly. None more so than Republican leader Bob Dole, who will do everything to ensure that Mr. Clinton becomes a lame duck president. Republicans haven't controlled both houses of Congress since Ike was president, Churchill prime minister, and televisions were encased in wood.
Speaker of this House.
Voters haven't kicked out a House Speaker since 1860. Mr. Clinton's ally, Tom Foley, may be the first. Another ally, Senator Edward Kennedy, seems likely to cling on to his seat, but that's where the president's good news ends. Oliver North, convicted of lying to Congress, is on the verge of joining it as a Republican senator. A coast-to-coast drubbing is on the cards, raising the possibility that Bill Clinton will be a one-term president.
Heba Rushdie is a little girl who symbolises the new spirit of goodwill between age-old enemies in the Middle East. Heba suffers an illness which 2 weeks ago could have killed her. But now the peace between Jordan and Israel means she will live.
Clutching the hand of a Jordanian border policeman, Heba Shaban cautiously crossed into Israel. A young Arab girl now reliant on Jewish doctors to save her life. It was a journey made possible by Jordan's peace treaty with Israel and a new spirit of cooperation on both sides of this border. Arriving at a Jerusalem hospital, Heba can now receive a bone marrow transplant. For her, it is the difference between life and death.
Come, let's go inside. It's cold outside.
And for her new Israeli doctor, it is proof that the benefits of peace are beginning to flow.
Peace is a real thing. It's not something, it's not a piece of document signed between politicians. It's a document that has a meaning. It means collaboration and cooperation between people who need people.
12-year-old Heba, though, cannot understand why being treated by an Israeli has caused such a stir. But for others, it is evidence that Jordan and Israel, hostile neighbours for 40 years, are moving beyond mere peace and towards reconciliation.
And Heba will receive new bone marrow from her 10-month-old baby brother.
Coming up, Jeremy has action from the New Zealand Trotting Cup, and Rugby's Little General unveils a battle plan to change Rugby League.
Tonight, 12,000 cans of beer shipped by the New Zealand Army at taxpayers' expense to a dry military exercise in Australia.
Well, I guess I can't blame Kiwi soldiers not wanting to drink Aussie beer, but 12,000 cans of beer does seem a heck of a lot.
Military manoeuvres under investigation at 6:30.
Good evening, everyone. Rugby League is tonight facing massive upheavals on 2 continents. A new Super League may be created in Australia, while in France, a former rugby union great has swapped allegiances. Jacques Ferrou is launching a new league in France, which is expected to plunder rugby union ranks. Here's our European correspondent, Mark Sainsbury.
With both the Australian and British league bosses in attendance, Ferrou announced this morning his master plan to revitalise the sport in France and increase international competition. And the International Board's video presentation left no doubt about the lessons they will apply to France. And that style, I hope, will bolster league's international standing.
Rugby Union scoffed at us in England and said, well, you're only midgets. Well, the midget's growing a little bit.
The timing of Farou's announcement with both Rugby Union and League World Cups next year raises the issue of poaching from the amateur game. He's refused to talk names.
It's a problem of conscience. French coach Pierre Berbizier is a friend, and he could make the French rugby team world champions. So I haven't got the right to touch them.
The new French league has already been written off by leading amateurs.
I'll be interested to sit down and have a look further at what Jack Brew's saying, but, you know, I can't see any young boys going there, I must say.
Promotion on the Australian scale and expectations of state sponsorship are part of the plan, but the international board says the New Zealand experience gave them encouragement.
Rugby league is just rating enormously over there on television, and with the Auckland Warriors coming into the new Winfield Cup next year, I think it's going to knock Rugby Union out of the ring altogether.
But the fortunes of rugby league in this country still rest on the stature of that one man, Jacques Farou, the symbol of rugby in France. Mark Sainsbury, One Network News, Paris.
The other big league change is likely to come in Sydney. Media magnate Rupert Murdoch is expected to unveil a $500 million Super League later this week, and it's likely to consist of just 12 teams, including the Auckland Warriors. Paul Patrick reports.
Knocks it back for Canberra. That might be it.
This might have been the last Winfield Cup final as we know it. Media giant Rupert Murdoch wants to take over the game. If he has his way, all breakaway sides will get a $2 million gift. But at the same time, the number of teams in the Premier competition will be slashed from 20 to 12. The only teams to survive intact will be the two most successful sides recently, along with some bigger Winfield Cup clubs, plus Perth and Auckland. Then come the controversial proposals, merging St George and Canterbury, some of the glamour sides, and the two worst teams from last season. The Auckland Warriors aren't convinced by the proposals.
Why should we be lured by this almighty dollar? Our loyalty is also with the New South Wales Rugby League, and we see no reason to walk away from it.
Australian Rugby League is just as adamant change won't take place.
There's no doubt that certain people who see the game as a success, in many cases now want a part of it. But they're not going to gain that easily.
To leave the Australian Rugby League and take the risk of going into a competition which may not exist after 2 or 3 years could mean the end of your club altogether. So the financial inducements that you would have to get would have to be massive.
The big winners, though, would be the top players.
If there's no salary caps, well, the sky's the limit, isn't it? Unfortunately, I won't be there to reap the rewards.
Regardless of the scheme's viability, ARL chiefs will have crisis meetings with Murdoch representatives later this week over the future of the Winfield Cup. Paul Patrick, One Network News.
A perfect record was on the line at the New Zealand Trotting Cup in Christchurch. Chokin, the defending champion, has never been beaten over 3,200 metres. Today, he was looking for his second cup. Peter Williams reports.
Last year's winner, $1 million plus in stake money and unbeaten at Addington. Chokin had every reason to be the favourite. But down the back straight for the last time, the punter's choice was in trouble.
Chokin is struggling, the favourite. I don't like him at all. He's just drifting away off the pace and he can't...
Meanwhile, as they raced for home, Master Musician was calling the tune, but BBC was closing fast.
He's starting to stagger. BBC's outstaying him. And it's BBC. BBC beats Master Musician Matthew Lee.
BBC has raced from the small Canterbury community of Chertsey. The victory a triumph for his Ashburton driver, Jim Curtin.
When Master Musician kicked at the top of the straight, did you think you could catch him?
Not until the last bit. Probably about 100 to go. I thought I've got a show, and he kept coming.
In the day's other feature, the Sires Stakes final for 3-year-olds, Il Vicolo easily justified his favouritism.
Strongly down to the line, he's going to win it easily.
That victory some consolation for trainers Barry and Roy Purdon, who missed out with Chokin. Peter Williams, One Network News.
So an easy victory for the favourite, Il Vicolo, although the return's not big there for the punters, but some did better with the New Zealand Trotting Cup, BBC paying a good dividend, and the trifecta worth almost $7,500. And live coverage tomorrow of the TVNZ 2000 Guineas, 4:40 on 1.
Jeremy, thank you.
Recapping our main story now, central New Zealanders copped the worst of the storm damage, with homes flooded and buildings battered by gale force winds. In Wellington, the sewage system cracked under the pressure, spilling sewage into houses in Kilbirnie. And we've just heard a civil emergency has been declared in Wanganui. The river is rising rapidly and homes along the river are being evacuated.
Well, Jim's back now with the weather picture for tonight and tomorrow.
Well, it'll be a rough night for the North Island Ranges, as I mentioned before. Quite a nasty day all round tomorrow, but tame by today's standards. Hastings was a hot town with a high of 28 degrees, but Mr. Ugly Storm has been sucking cool air into the south. Temperatures range from 9 to 18. Well, the rain band we see quite clearly moving on to the North Island in our satellite pictures here. In its wake, absolute chaos, a confusion of shower and thundercloud, and on the back edge of that, some cool air which will move around the trough and come on shore tomorrow. So the flow, the cyclonic flow, continues tomorrow, picking up these little frontal bands and tossing up the country. It'll also pick up the cloud we've just seen and thrash it into most places as the day progresses. Lots of rain tonight and tomorrow morning for the north. Heavy falls are on the way with isolated thunderstorms in the west, but by midday most of the rain will have gone through and we're back to a showery mixture with gusty winds, but they too will ease back. Into the afternoon, the last of the rain moves off Gisborne and Hawke's Bay and out to sea. Then we're back to those big unstable cloud towers which will move in from the Tasman Sea, big high seas which will punch out some heavy squally showers and of course more thunderstorms. Temperatures range from 15 to 24. Well, we've got a new player. How about some snow, just to toss on a bit of interest? Check that out. The cold air we saw way out in the Tasman Sea we think will bring in little snow flurries for the southern mountains. We've got heavy squally showers to the west, again with some thunder. Only a few of those showers will reach the eastern seaboard. The wind, of course, is strong in open areas. Into the afternoon, things are much the same, but late in the day, a southwest change is possible for the coasts of Southland and Otago. Bit of a nip in the air with that flow. Temperatures are down to 11 to 21. In the big towns. For all the main streets from Whangarei to Rotorua and Hamilton, rain eases to showers with strong nor'westers. And again, rain back to showers in the bay cities. Wellington still blustery, the western towns still very windy with squally showers. No savage gales, but again still very windy in the south. Nelson cops a few showers, but from Christchurch south, long fine spells and the odd splash. Marginally better on Thursday, plenty of sunshine out east, more showers in the west and north. On a day saturated with weather drama, it's good night from me.
Jim, thank you, and that's Tuesday's One Network News.
Holmes is next from us. Good night.